And if you will surrender to God and trust Him, He will bring you back to those moments in the right time and in the right way. And that there's some moments that you don't have to revisit in order for Him to bring healing and wholeness.
It's our limiting beliefs that ultimately keep us from becoming the best we're capable of becoming. Something's got to change, but that change has to happen first on the inside. It's time to get unstuck. It's time to get your why back. It's never too late. Let's start today.
Helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. This is Win Today. And now, here's your host, Christopher Cook.
Hey everybody, welcome to the conversation. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. As always, thanks for the download. I'm glad you're here. Today's conversation is going to be one that many of you resonate with because you tell me you do. Here's the deal. The pain and the shame of your past, left unchecked, will quickly sabotage your perspective about who you are, your inherent worth, the hope and possibility of your life's circumstances, and your closest relationships. It's true. But the way out of the pain and shame sometimes involves a deep dive back into it. And that's really hard to do. Not to revisit every moment as if for the first time, but as a means to find truth and resolution and peace so that you can move forward. You know, too often we don't initially recognize that the scars of our past will tell a story of healing if we let them do so. Kim Walker-Smith is a singer-songwriter, worship leader, and best known as the face of Jesus culture, a global worship movement. For over 15 years, she has played a major role in influencing worshipers and worship teams around the world toward their own pursuit of Jesus. Today, Kim is married with 3 children and passionate about helping other people forge their roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. But behind her public success and renown as the face of Jesus culture, and behind the hope that she brings to millions of people around the globe, is a never-before-heard story that was birthed from pain and trauma. And that's the story you're going to hear right now. Kim, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Kim, I want to set the stage for our conversation today by talking about a moment in time that was sort of a page turn in your own life, and that was July 2006, the very first Jesus Culture Conference. Take us back and tell us the story about what happened.
Yeah, we were going to be recording our second album, but it was going to be our first DVD, the first time that we're filming this live as it's all happening. And I had just spent some time across the U.S. out in North Carolina with some friends of mine. And my friend John Mark McMillan had written this song, How He Loves. And I had heard him leading it in a worship set out there. And it had been a really powerful song for me that had really brought me into a moment with God and was really impactful for me in my heart. And so when I came back home, I really wanted us to record that song and to sing that song as well. And I had to convince my team of it just a little bit. It was really different than what we normally do, and different for a lot of worship songs. It's really wordy and had some lyrics that everyone kind of went, oh, that's a little different. What do we think about that? And I felt really strongly that this is an important song, an important message. And I felt confident that people would feel something and connect with this message of how much God loves us, just like I had. And when we got into the actual moment in worship with that song, the presence of God was so strong in the room, and it felt almost tangible, and it felt like there was an opportunity for us to just come into the love of God in a way that we hadn't before, to really feel it and see it and experience it. And from my own journey up to this point, I knew that God's love, it brings freedom, it drives out fear. It breaks things off of us. And I wanted everyone to experience that. And I didn't want anyone to miss out on this moment. And I felt this sense of urgency. Like, I don't want us to miss this. And so I begin to, in the middle of the song, talk about it and just say what's happening in the moment, in the room right now, and that the love of God is here. And if you haven't encountered the love of God, that this is what he wants to do right now. He wants you to feel his love. And I'm trying my best to communicate this. And I feel like I'm stumbling over my words and I'm not doing a good job articulating what is happening in the moment. We go back into the song and sing it some more. And I run off the stage when it's all done. And I just feel completely humiliated and embarrassed, ashamed. I felt like I had just failed the moment. I felt like I'd failed my team. I felt really embarrassed. I'd sounded foolish just trying to communicate and hadn't done a good job communicating. I wondered if I had ruined the moment and people didn't actually experience what was happening in the room because of my, not so great job with the words. And I even felt like somehow I had let God down in this moment, like that he had come to do something powerful and I messed it up somehow. And I went to Banning, who's our pastor and a father in my life, and he was very encouraging and very loving and telling me, no, it was amazing, it was so good, it was powerful, people felt it, people were encountering God, but I didn't really believe him until I was on the other side of this thing when it all came out, and the testimonies started coming in of people who were watching the video and hearing the song and encountering that love and having their lives changed in that moment, listening to the song and worshiping along with us.
Indeed. Kim, I want to pull back on a moment because there was a transformational moment when you recognized what was possible because of the love of God. And you began to speak that over people like you just said, but that wasn't necessarily what you were experiencing in the same moment. It was more like embarrassment and shame, as you described in your book. What happened?
Yeah. So, in the actual moment as it's happening, I can feel what's going on in the room and I'm desperately wanting to communicate it. And it does feel scary. It does feel, there is that fear of I could mess this up and I could not do this right. Also, I could look like an idiot to all these people. They could laugh at me. They could think I'm ridiculous for what I'm saying. The fear of man that kind of comes on you in that moment. But what I have learned in my journey and my relationship with Jesus is that he always meets me when I can step out, when I can take, even if it's the smallest amount of courage. It only takes a very simple amount of courage, which sometimes is just the courage to say yes. Sometimes I don't have the courage to even pick myself up and move myself forward, but I do have the courage to at least open my mouth and say yes. And that's what I felt in that moment was I'm terrified. I don't want to mess this up, but I'm going to step out and I'm going to trust that God will meet me there. And even in the moment, as it's happening, I stepped out in boldness, faced my fear, and then I still felt like I messed it up. I felt like then that fear was kind of washing over me, but I'm plowing ahead. I keep doing the best I can to communicate it and speak it out because I know that what I feel in the moment with God and his presence is real, and I don't want to miss that. And walking off stage, the shame and the feeling of failure was overwhelming to me. But God, like he always does, he met me. He met me there in that, and he took what looked like a mess and what looked like someone just, bumbling on like a fool, and made something really beautiful. And he, for all of the weakness, for all of the, it wasn't planned, it wasn't thought out, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't clearly or perfectly articulated. It just was what it was. And he took all of that and did something really incredible with it.
Kim, at the same time, there's a lot of fear and shame being unearthed in your life, the wounds and the scars and the pain, the anger of the past. All of that has a story to it, Kim. Take us back to what you described as the one moment that changed your life at the age of 2.
Yeah, the one moment that really changed everything for me was when my dad was in his first motorcycle wreck, and he went into a coma, and the doctors were not sure at all that he would wake up from the coma. And he had suffered a really terrible brain injury because he wasn't wearing a helmet when he was riding his motorcycle. A woman had run a stop sign and hit him. And back then, it wasn't law in where we lived to have to wear a helmet. And the damage was really bad. And he, to the doctor's shock and amazement, he did actually wake from the coma, and they had said, well, okay, he's waking up, but he's not going to be able to talk or walk, or communicate clearly ever again. He's not going to be the same at all. They thought that he'd basically be kind of, in their terms, a vegetable, that he wouldn't be able to really have a life. And he defied all of those odds, and he learned to walk and talk again. But he was never the same after that. He was a different person after that, which some of that is normal from brain injuries and kind of the healing process your brain goes through. And some of it was just it wasn't the healing process. It was just the scar tissue, the deterioration, the damage in the brain. And after that, he was just a different person, which led to the breakdown of my parents' marriage and ultimately their divorce when I was 4.
Wow. And then, Kim, to fast forward a little bit, after your parents divorced, there was Peter, and then there was Greg, your next 2 stepfathers. What was the most galvanizing memory with both of those men, and what did the instability in that time of your life do to your paradigm about life as a young girl?
Much of my life in that time was lived in fear. I went through a lot of abuse from both of those stepfathers, and probably one of the scariest and hardest moments was the moment that I realized that all of this kind of terror and fear and abuse could actually result in, I really believed in death. My mom and one of my stepfathers were in a huge argument, and my mom had told me to take my siblings and to go to the car, and I didn't want to leave her. I was afraid to leave her alone. And I went to the door and I kind of opened it and shut it to make it sound like we had went outside, and we stayed hiding around the corner. And I heard them fighting, and he suddenly said, if you come back, I'm going to blow your head off.
Oh my God.
And I ran out screaming and terrified for my mom. Something in me wanted to fight, but something in me was also completely terrified. And it was also a very profound moment of realizing how serious this was, and how this wasn't just something in my head that I was experiencing like an angry parent, that this was actually a huge threat to us. Mm-hmm. And for me as a little girl, man, I have a little girl, and I can't even look now, like looking back, it's incredible to me, the things that were shaped in my mind in that time. Mm-hmm. The feelings of, never feeling safe, always feeling like you had to have your guard up and protect yourself, feeling like there's nobody that will protect you, feeling like your life could end all of a sudden in a moment because of that rage or that anger, feeling fearful for your life, feeling fearful for your mom's life, feeling fearful. What if something happens to my mom? Then mm-hmm. Where will I go? Who will take care of me? What will my life be like? We had times where we didn't have money for food. We went hungry. Different kind of issues that come along with that, having the hunger and being worried about where will things come from to take care of you. Those were just really painful, really unstable times in my life.
Kim, in your book, I was struck by this, and you were describing the pain and the trauma in such a real way that it exploded. Talk about the time that you went after Greg with a knife. It was self-protection on a whole nother level.
Yeah, I just got to this point. I've heard, I don't know the statistics or the studies around any of this, but I've heard people talk a lot about the fight or flight, that there's something inside of people when they're faced in a moment that they fight or flight. And I kind of felt like this was that moment for me where I was just fed up and I had had enough and I was done. And I decided that I wanted to fight. And I wanted it to be clear that I just could not put up with this anymore. And so I charged at him in self-defense,
Sure.
and trying to protect myself and my family. And it didn't work. I was a very small, very young girl, and it was very easy for him to kind of just throw me off. And I took a beating after that. And I think that beating was an attempt to teach me a lesson, don't ever do that again. But it only made me more resolute on, I want to get us out of here, and I want to fight, and I want to live through this, and I want to protect my family. And I did take on a role of feeling responsible for my mom and for my siblings, feeling like I need to protect them. I need to look out for them, and feeling like I was their protector.
Kim, moving and divorce and abuse are very significant stressors. How did it affect your overall health? I mean, how did you cope?
I wasn't, I probably handled things much like any girl in that situation where, there's these things inside of me coming out of wanting to fight and defend myself, but also, with it not being a safe environment and things like not having a father to protect his girl, to tell his girl that you are worth fighting for, you are worth protecting, not being told you're beautiful, not being told that you have worth. These are all things that are incredibly important to little girls and to their mindsets, to their growth, their development inside of them. And what was taking place inside of me was just rage and fury and anger. And, looking back, I can see that was a coping mechanism for me. That was something that was helping me to get through that. But also, and again, I couldn't articulate this at the time, but moving way forward in the story, I could see what had happened here. But a lot of times for children, when they've gone through trauma, something that was so significant that it brought a lot of terror and fear to them, oftentimes children, their brains will kind of create another person or personality to handle or to cope with what's happening in the moment. And it can look different for a lot of children. It can look like a child suddenly kind of going off into a little world of their own, maybe talking to themselves, singing to themselves, and not in a way that seems weird, but actually in a way that seems fairly normal for children. You could see a child doing that and think it's pretty normal for kids to be imaginative and to have made up friends, have made up worlds, talk to themselves, talk to their made up friends. This is all somewhat normal child play, normal child mindset. But there's another side of that for children of abuse, children who have been through a lot of trauma, where they their brain in a sense it fractures. And it's kind of like, it's innocence shattered, it's childhood shattered, it's a heart shattered, it's a little mind that is shattered. Our job as parents is to help mold and grow and nurture our children's minds and hearts and health.
Sure.
And the opposite was happening in this environment. So the opposite was happening with my little mind and my little heart. And coming out, on the other side of all of that, I could see where, in order to cope with everything that was happening in my childhood, everything that was happening in my life, my own brain had kind of created these other parts of me. And the only way I can describe it is as if something was shattered and you're just in pieces. And so I was just very, very, very broken. And that was becoming more and more evident the older I got, because a very broken person does not know how to cope with life. And they cope with life the best they know how, but it's not in a good way. Mm-hmm. And so I'm having, my biggest thing was rage and anger and just a lot of self-hatred, a lot of hatred towards people. Just trying to cope with the pain that was inside of me. And oftentimes it was easier to feel anger than it was to feel the pain. And so I would allow myself to go to that place of anger just to avoid the pain and how much that hurt.
Wow. Reading your story, Kim, it appears as though shame was such a predominant negative emotion in your life. And for a lot of people, shame manifests in self-protection. And you've talked about that. Mm-hmm. Every move, every conversation, every thought really has to be calculated, because if you make a mistake, it yet again proves that you probably are a mistake, like at the core of your person. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of shame. So I'd love to know, how did shame affect your view of your own worth and value in the middle of that? And did you feel like you had to prove yourself, or just shut down and then close the doors to your heart amidst all of this?
Yeah, I definitely, I had a moment, and I talk about it in the book. My mom had sent me to a church camp, and I had this encounter with God that was really significant for me as a child. And I'd never experienced anything like it, and I couldn't fully verbalize what was going on, but I knew that I had a taste of God and of His love, and it was like water to my heart that was so dry and desperate. Yeah. And when I got home from that camp, I wanted my mom to take me to the church that had set that up, and we went. And when the worship started, I went running to the front, and I was just dancing and worshiping and singing my heart out to Jesus. And a woman came and she grabbed my shoulders and she walked me over and she sat me down. And instantly, so much shame overwhelmed me. I felt so ashamed of what I had done, and I didn't even understand what I had done wrong. And when I went home and I talked to my mom about it, I think my mom didn't really know what to communicate to me either, and she was kind of struggling with helping me with that and understanding. And I think, they were just, as an adult, I look back and go, I think they were just trying to transition. And here was this little girl lost in a moment of worship, and they're just trying to move on with whatever they had planned for their church service or whatever. But for me, as a little girl who did not understand anything about that moment, there was just incredible shame, and something in me, I could not cope with the shame that I felt, and I just shut down my heart. I put up these big walls. And in my book, I describe it as if suddenly someone shut down the business and put a sign up that said closed. We are shut down. It is done. And something in me, it was such a huge shutdown that I couldn't even say the words "I love you" anymore. Like I couldn't tell my mom "I love you." I couldn't tell my sister "I love you." I was so shut down in my heart, and part of it was just a result of the shame I felt, but part of it was my choosing and saying, "Oh, well, okay, then I'm not going to put myself out there again. I'm not going to try this again. I'm not going to attempt this again. I'm not going to allow something good to come in and make me feel shame again." And so I wanted to just completely shut down and isolate my heart because I didn't want to feel that ever again. I didn't want to
Sure.
feel the shame again.
As if that wasn't enough, then shortly after that, if I'm not mistaken, if I have my facts straight, your biological father is in another serious accident.
Yeah.
And your mom's diagnosed with cancer. Kim, how did you function?
Yeah, I wasn't really functioning. That was high school. My mom's diagnosed with cancer, and my dad has another motorcycle wreck. Same kind of thing. He was wearing a helmet that time, but unfortunately, it was again really, really severe brain injuries. He's in a coma. Doctors are saying the same thing. He won't wake from this. And I was coping the best I could in the sense of I'm trying to be a good student. I'm participating in sports. I'm participating in theater at school, student council. I'm trying to make friends. I'm participating in pageants. I'm trying to put on this facade on the outside that everything is good. I've got this under control, because that was another thing that really came out inside of me was I live in a world 24/7 that feels completely out of control to me, and it terrifies me.
Yeah.
So I am grasping at anything that I can feel a sense of control over. I cannot get control of my world I live in. I can't get control of my house, my home, my pain, my fear, my shame. I can't get control of any of that. So where can I get control? And at school, doing well, participate. This was one area I could get control. I could choose to do these things well and choose to look a certain way to everybody. And I wanted to please people. I wanted to look like I had everything together. I wanted to look like I'm okay and that I don't have any of these horrendous things in my life.
Yeah.
The shame that I felt at the thoughts inside my head of I'm a mistake. I hate myself. I want to die. I don't like my life. The shame that I felt at the anger I had towards stepdads, towards my mom, towards life, towards God. I didn't want anyone to know about those things. And so my coping through all of that was just trying to put on a mask to the world that I was in control and okay. But on the inside, I was crumbling and falling apart and losing control every day.
My gosh. Kim, when did things begin to change? I mean, that really brings us to a phrase that I believe turned the key on your journey to wholeness. And that phrase is brave surrender. When did things begin to change for you?
Yeah. The biggest moment of change came when I was a senior in high school, and my family was gone for the day, and I was at home by myself, and I could not handle the weight of everything anymore, and I decided that I wanted to end my life. And I through a lot of tears, I went into my the medicine cabinet in my mom's bathroom, and I just started taking everything I could, from cancer medicines to other pain medicines that were there, everything that I could, just trying to swallow everything down. And I blacked out, and I woke up a couple hours later, and I woke up and thought, I'm awake. Like I was in shock. Like this wasn't my plan. And I looked around, I'm laying on the floor, and I looked around expecting to see, that I got sick or something, some evidence, some sign of something bad happening. There's just nothing. And I'm kind of taking I'm kind of feeling my body out. Like I don't have a headache. I don't have a stomach ache. Like it's as if it didn't even happen. And I just can't even wrap my brain around what's going on right now. And I instantly have this thought that God, he must actually very much be real, and that he must love me. And I broke down sobbing, and I finally surrendered to him. And I said, I will give my life to you, and I will not look back. but you've got to help me get free. I need help. And that was when everything started changing, because in that moment, I really took responsibility for my relationship with God. It became my own. This was me and him. And I began my journey with him. And I realized what was required every step of that journey was this constant surrendering to him, constantly trusting him. And, I called the book Brave Surrender because it is really easy to surrender when you feel like you're at the end of yourself, like you're just beat down, you're lying on the floor, you're waving your white flag, you have no strength left. Like, it's easy to surrender in that moment because you just have nothing left and you're just waving your white flag, surrendering. But it's much harder to surrender when you are a little too strong for your own good. When I through all of this, I had become a very independent person. And in my mind, I couldn't rely on anybody but myself. I could only rely on myself, and I especially could not rely on God, is what I believed. And so the requirement to surrender required me kind of laying down my own strength. The brave surrender, in my mind, is the surrender when you're having to make a choice, even when you don't feel it, even when you don't feel like you're at the bottom, even when everything inside of you is going, I'm scared to trust you that you are going to meet me there and that you are going to take care of me. I'm scared to trust that you will love me and that you will help me. And it's just it requires a different kind of strength. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. And it poses another question, Kim, because I think confronting the lies of your past must have been a very painful process. So I'd love to ask, what would you want people listening right now to know about revisiting our past as we pursue wholeness through, as you said, a brave surrender?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would want people to know is that if you are choosing to revisit your past and to surrender and allowing God to bring wholeness and healing, first of all, I commend you, because it takes so much boldness and courage, I know, and I can say with all my heart that you won't regret it. I know for certainty that he will meet you there and that he will guide you through it every step of the way. The second thing I'll say is that I learned in this whole process that a lot of times there are moments in our past that are so traumatic and scary, and it can be really terrifying to revisit those things. And if you will surrender to God and trust him, he will bring you back to those moments in the right time and in the right way. And that there's some moments that you don't have to revisit in order for him to bring healing and wholeness. There's going to be times that he wants you to face something in your past in order to show you and reveal something greater, to reveal maybe where he was, to reveal his perspective on all of that. And that's what brings so much healing and wholeness and freedom. And there's other times when I feel like he says, you know what, we don't need to revisit that, and I'm going to bring healing to you in this moment. A different way. And that's been my experience and my journey with him. The other thing I would say is that God, he gives us, when we can go back to those moments with him, he gives a new perspective and new eyes. And that was the only way I could describe it in the book, that it was really like getting new eyes and seeing everything through a new lens. And suddenly I could see where he was working and moving on my behalf, where he was taking these terrifying moments, these painful moments, and he was already shaping something inside of me and building something inside of me. He's the God who was and is to come. He's there in the past. He's here in this moment with us, and he's already gone into our future and prepared a way for us. And that's what I was experiencing going back and having these moments with him. I was seeing how he was there with me and taking care of me and fighting for me and grieving with me, but he was also moving ahead into my future and saying, I'm not going to let this take her out. I'm not going to let this destroy her. And I'm going to use all of this to build something incredible inside of her, something that can't be torn down, something that's going to bring freedom, not just for her, but for other people. And I just think if you can boldly allow yourself to trust him and surrender to him, that he will do that. He will rewrite your story. And, if you would have asked me years ago when I was standing there in those moments and God asking me to surrender to him, and I'm not wanting to surrender, I'm not wanting to go there. If you were to ask me, can God really take all of that and make something good out of it? Can God really use that in your life to shape and create something beautiful? I don't think I would have told you he could. I don't think I believed that. But coming out of it on the other side, I can say with 100% certainty, yes, he can. It doesn't matter how bad or how ugly or how grim it is or was. He absolutely can take any mess, any pain, any torment, and he can set you free, and he can change everything from the perspective to the outcome.
Oh my gosh, Kim, that's so powerful. Would you leave every listener with last words of encouragement as we wrap our conversation today?
Yeah. For all the listeners right now, I just my prayer with this book and with sharing my story, the very first thing that my hope is and my prayer is that as you are reading, that you encounter the love of God. As you're hearing these words that we're speaking today, my prayer is that you feel his presence, that wherever you're listening to this, whether it's in your car, in your home, at work, wherever you are, that you can feel the presence of God right now, surrounding you, surrounding your heart, wooing your heart, speaking softly and tenderly to you, that you are experiencing the God who meets you right where you are, right in this moment, that he's not afraid of the mess. He's not afraid of the circumstances. Even if your own choices have put you in that mess, he still meets you there. And he's so good and kind and gracious that way. And my second prayer and my hope with this message, with this story, with this book, is that you would feel the boldness and courage in your own life to surrender any area that you haven't surrendered, any dark corner that you've been trying to hide or avoid, any pain of the past, something that's been holding you back, something that's been weighing you down, that you would bravely surrender to God and allow him to set you free, allow him to give you a new perspective, to rewrite your story, to take the pain, to take the ugliness, and to create something beautiful that becomes a gift and a blessing to you, something that it's no longer holding you down, it's no longer bringing shame, it's no longer bringing pain, but now you have an incredible freedom and an incredible hope and a joy and even something to offer the world because of what you have walked through and what you've been set free from.
Guys, nothing is wasted. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today. What a sincere and powerful conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Coming out of that conversation, the statement that sits with me most is when Kim said that surrender requires you to lay down your own strength. Now, here's the deal. When we experience pain or loss or disappointment, the last thing we want to do is typically surrender. What we want to do is wrap our arms around life and try to control all of the circumstances in our life so that we can mitigate any future surprises and future loss and future pain. But here's the deal, and this is what I walked in for a couple of years, and it's a cycle of pain that maybe you are trapped in right now. So I want to illustrate how that cycle of pain operates and then how to break free from it. So in life, when we experience pain or loss or hurt or disappointment and don't bring resolution to that, The typical recourse is that we insulate our hearts out of fear and then we self-protect. And in doing so, what happens is we isolate ourselves not only from bad circumstances and bad people, but from good people and life-giving relationships that can help bring wholeness and healing. But because of the fear motivation, we isolate ourselves for fear of future pain. And when we do that, here's what happens. We suffocate ourselves from the life and the truth of not only the Word of God, but His Spirit. And because of that hardness of heart, what happens is, like a muscle that doesn't get used, our character gets atrophied. Our potential gets atrophied under the weight of our circumstances and the spirit of fear. And then the muscles of perseverance and endurance needed to walk through this life as more than a conqueror never get developed. And then typically, we live as a victim. And then we turn to shame and blame, and then turn to the Lord and say, see, if you were faithful, this wouldn't have happened. See, everyone in my life, you wouldn't have let this happen. And then the cycle just repeats itself. More pain, more hurt, more disappointment, more self-protection and insulation of the heart, more isolation, more suffocation and atrophy of our potential and our character, and then more shame and blame. Guys, that is no way to live. Now listen to me with your heart. I want you to hear something. No one is invalidating the pain that you're walking through right now. It's just to say that the day that you decide that what Jesus did for you is greater than what happened to you is the day you will begin to move forward into pursuing wholeness. And as Kim said, that is the brave surrender. When in your own strength you say, I'm going to lay it down because your strength is made perfect in my weakness, and I choose this day that your purpose for my life will not die under the weight of what I perceive is impossible. Guys, what we believe dictates how we talk, how we live, and how we act. Nothing is wasted. It's never too late. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, let's make a change starting today. Guys, joining me on the show next week is Randy Clark. We're jumping into a subject that has often been misunderstood and misapplied, and that is the subject of healing. The conversation is really challenging, really energizing, and I really believe it'll build your faith. So here's a preview.
Chris, one of the things is we do need hope. We need an understanding that God is good. He didn't put it on us. When we have a theology that everything that happens in life happens because God caused it, how can you have faith to ask Him to take away what your theology says He gave you? So I think that is one of the things is a basis of an understanding of God is He's not the author of evil. He's not the author of disease. Jesus went about doing good and healing those who were oppressed by the devil. You can be offended, you can get upset at God if things are not happening in the way you think they should, but where else can you go?
That's next week right here on Win Today. It is going to be a powerful, challenging, energizing conversation, so please don't miss that conversation with Randy Clark again right here on Win Today, episode 139 coming at you. Well, listen, many of you have taken the time to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, and for that, I just want to say thank you so much. And if you haven't done so, would you do that for me right now? Take 30 seconds right now. Go to the Apple Podcast app, write a review, rate this show. It really helps me get in front of more people, which helps me help other people just like you design their roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. I really appreciate it. But until next week, visit me over at wintoday.tv for blog posts and archive podcasts, all aimed at helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. Hey, let's hang out on social media. I'm ridiculously easy to find. 00 Chris Cook on Instagram and on Twitter. Of course, on Facebook as well. Have an awesome week. We'll see you next week with Randy Clark. Bye-bye.